The head of the CIA and MI6 have issued a dire warning for the West. Just what could be so serious that the two titans of the intelligence world feel the need to get down together and warn the public and the world about the future? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. We're going to be analyzing their warning and just what it means for you. Let's get into it. Okay, first off, by the way, guys, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, that does make a difference. It doesn't cost you anything, and it is the best way to support the channel and tell the YouTube algorithm that the content I make is legitimate. Now, once you've done that, let's take a look at this. Bill Burns, Richard Moore are two career intelligence officers, some of whom spent some time as diplomats, which is actually a great way to round out an intelligence officer, because ultimately, as much as the movies might tell you otherwise, the chief role of intelligence is to make sure that the people who practice statecraft, whether politics or politics with guns, also known as war, have all the information they need to make the best decision possible for their country. Now, they have released in the Financial Times a joint op-ed with this warning. And before we talk about that, let's analyze first off the choice to talk about the Financial Times or to talk within the Financial Times. Financial Times is a really high prestige news outlet, and it is probably one of the best news outlets currently conducting reporting in the world. When you look at the readership numbers, they're crazy, right? The Financial Times is the single media outlet with the highest net worth readers in the globe. The average guys, that means 50% of the people are above this. The average income of the Financial Times reader is £221,000. So that's the equivalent of what, around $300K a year US, right? You also have the average net worth of a Financial Times reader is 2.4 million USD. And the FT's global audience is 2.6 million readers. And this is what I think is so crazy, because what that tells you, again, that's a global audience. So that 2.4 million average net worth is, it's going to encompass all of the connected, powerful intelligentsia in the West, right? These are people, this is an audience of people who work for major banks with decision-making authority, major publicly traded companies in very high roles, CEOs, COOs, CTOs. They're going to be very well connected politically. They're going to be political mega donors. These are people who can actually start to pull the strings and exert influence on the levers of power. Now, that I think is a core part of this, because again, while anyone can read it, right? It's a warning to the public. What there is encoded in this, I think, is a call to action, for lack of a better term, for individuals who might not be part of the national security apparatus, but who are still have a vested interest. And I think that's the story within the story here. So let's take a look at what they have to say exactly. So the opening paragraph, right, is very standard kind of fluff. Hey, US, UK, we've worked together for a long time. We've worked together through two world wars and the Cold War. We fought against terrorism and the global war on terrorism, right? But they say the challenges are an unprecedented array of threats facing the US and UK, right? And they say, first off, we are resisting Putin's war of aggression in Ukraine. They say we saw it coming. We totally saw it coming. Nothing, that always annoys me when people are like, I totally knew it was coming. We were able to warn the international community so we could rally to Ukraine's defense. This part is actually true. I think they did actually know it was coming. It's one of the reasons I think the U.S. political establishment became so irate in 2019 when Trump held up that aid to Ukraine because they knew. Right? It wasn't just a random U.S. ally that wanted to buy some U.S. equipment, right? Because we sell equipment to dozens of countries. The reason that the political Congress got so irate about it was because they probably couldn't come out and say it, but they knew Putin was preparing for war with Ukraine. They were preparing to eliminate Ukraine as a sovereign state. And they knew that being willing to delay this aid, add conditions to it, was a really, really dire situation, much more so than, again, selling aid to someone like Egypt, for example. Right? So, as they point out, right, Putin, they sound confident. They're like, Putin will not succeed in extinguishing Ukraine's sovereignty and independence. This is something I think almost all of us can agree on. Even Putin himself probably recognizes this at this point, that he's unlikely to take Kiev. He's unlikely to take Lviv. It's not even clear that he'll be able to take the remainder of Donetsk. But what I thought was most interesting is this. The conflict has demonstrated that technology deployed alongside extraordinary bravery and traditional weaponry can alter the course of war. This, I think, is one of their first messages to that kind of global elite class. Because remember, we talked about them being financial professionals and heads of major companies. But if you're worth $2.4 million, there's at least a fair cohort of those people that are tech millionaires, right? And he says, they say the Ukraine war, they tell them, is the first of its kind to combine open source software with cutting edge battlefield technology, right? Classic example that we've seen on this channel is that not only do they use things like open source hardware like Starlink programs, but we've seen the primary platform by which Ukraine communicates at the headquarters level is actually Discord, right? You want to stream that drone footage, you literally, guys are just screen sharing it and putting it on Discord. But here's the thing, it happens at such scale and the Russian military is so degraded that it doesn't matter that it's not that secure, right? So again, you're talking about combining this open source software of, again, using Discord, right? The edgy gamer, Slack for gamers, combining it with, of course, high-tech battlefield tech like these FPV drones and some of their artillery, Uber for artillery systems, right? That software. But they also talk about harnessing commercial and military satellite imagery, right? Implying that, of course, Ukraine doesn't run their own satellites. So presumably U.S. satellites are providing them with some imagery. But as we've seen, in a lot of cases, commercial satellite imagery that you and I can go in and buy for 10 or 15 bucks a pop can give them comparably detailed looks behind Russian lines, right? They talk about high and low sophistication, cyber warfare, social media, open source intelligence, uncrewed and seaborne, aerial and seaborne vehicles, and information operations, and human and signals intelligence at an incredible pace and scale, right? And they say, most of all, it's underlined the imperative to adapt, experiment, and innovate. This is another massive red flag. This is another important signal, because they're saying, listen, the current Pentagon system, the current way the Pentagon operates, which is mega prestige systems with prestige contracts, right? But what that means is that these systems are hard to build, right? The F-35 costs is the most expensive thing of all time. It costs $1.58 trillion. For perspective, guys, the entire GDP, all the goods and services made in the entire United States this year will be about $21 trillion. So you're talking about as much as 5% of the US GDP in a given year is being spent just to build the F-35. Now, obviously, this $1.58 trillion is spread out over a decade, so it doesn't look that bad, but you're still talking about this is a prestige aircraft, and the fear is that what happens if the F-35 gets countered? Let's say Russia or China develops an AI that can tease out the radar signals that are supposedly undetectable to humans, but it can go, we can actually figure out a stealthy aircraft, rendering the F-35 junk. What's the plan B? The answer is there is no plan B, because we're spending trillions on this system. Oh, and by the way, if let's say China gets a new weapon that smokes all of our F-35s, how long is it going to take us to build up our air fleet? The answer is years. The same thing is true for carriers, high-end combat ships. Almost everything is a prestige piece of equipment that has no ability to adapt to the battlefield, right? And we don't have the capacity to build the next thing. So there's warning. They're saying, listen, we don't know how else to get the Pentagon to stop thinking this way. We have to build an army, a military that can adapt, experiment, and innovate faster than anyone can expect. And Mark Milley and Eric Schmidt actually said almost the exact same thing. So that alone should tell you something. That these guys are looking and they're saying, listen, the old school warfare is gone. We are operating warfare as a startup. What I also want to point out is the way they talk about the way everything gets put and pulled together. You can see right here, guys, it used to be like social media, and it still is, for kids dancing. But look at the way that this channel alone has influenced the operation. Look at how it's played together, right? So I have no affiliation with the Ukrainian government, right? But I'm a largely pro-Ukrainian voice, right? But what have we done? Well, you guys, if you were on the live stream, we just raised a bunch of money to buy drones and Starlink and EcoFlows for the units fighting in Pokrovsk to help stop the Russian advance there. So here we are using social media, uncrewed aerial vehicles, cutting-edge battlefield tech, and open source software combined with, of course, just old school, real deal, tough as nails Ukrainian fighters to win the war. But here's the thing you got to ask yourself. Does U.S. military have a mechanism like that? Do they have anything like that? Right? No, of course not. They're centralized. They're stovepiped. They are completely hidebound, right? And what these guys are saying is we've got to move past it. They're also recognizing that, listen, they're warning, a different warning here for a different group, right? This was for the tech bros to say, listen, you guys, we need you, the tech guys. We can't keep giving Boeing trillion-dollar contracts to buy planes that fall out of the sky. Now, here's a part where they're messaging the infrastructure, right? The more conventional brick and mortar companies, financial services, healthcare, power generation. They're saying, listen, hey, we're disrupting. There's a reckless campaign of sabotage across Europe being waged by Russian intelligence. And it's using technology, another warning for the tech industry. They're using technology to spread lies and disinformation designed to drive wedges between us. Remember, the same day this dropped on the 6th, we found out that the Russians had bought and paid for some of the largest U.S. influencers in the world in order to push Russian talking points. It's a warning. It's saying, listen, ultimately, YouTube failed, right? Google probably saw this coming, right? And so these kind of environments, they say, listen, more people need to be on the lookout. We can't just sit there and kick our heels up and go, the CIA is going to figure out what the Russians are up to. It's not possible anymore. Everything is a target, right? I'm a target. You guys that are donors, you think the Russians would be into hacking people who are known to consume pro-Ukraine content? This is the 21st century. It is a boundaryless war. It's not like Iraq and Afghanistan where there's no front line. The war is taking place. Every war is a world war. And as they talk about, right, they also say, listen, China is the principal, this is an unusually strong statement. They're saying China is the principal intelligence and geopolitical challenge of the 21st century. That right there should tell you. Because again, what percentage of that readership do you think has business links to China? A high percentage of them. And to sit there and say they are the principal challenge, right? They don't use the word adversary, but that is what they probably want to use. They just can't politically call them an adversary. But this is strong language from people that know. And they're not wrong. Remember, guys, China is ultimately bankrolling Russia, enabling them to continue this war, buying and selling goods to and from Russia, And remember, China has no commitment to free speech. They have no commitment to open source technology. They have no human rights. None of those things exist in China. So if the West is unable to confront China, you're going to see a Chinese world order in which human rights, in which, frankly, people that aren't Han Chinese are going to be just crushed under the boot, right? You know what's happened to the Uyghurs? If the Chinese had their way, the CCP, excuse me, I shouldn't say that. The CCP had its way, the Chinese Communist Party, right? If they had their way, they would steamroll everyone who looks different, talks different, does anything different. So again, when you see these kind of America bad comments, like, yeah, no kidding, right? America isn't like a perfect country. It has many flaws, but there's a massive difference between us and the next largest rival country, China, which again, if you're a Uyghur in China, you're in a camp, okay? I know TikTok tells you that America's going to put all the minorities in camps, but that hasn't happened since the 40s, right? The West, we have protections for individual rights. China, there is no such thing, okay? Understand that while there's lots of criticisms directed at the West, China is on another level, and they are a real threat. And they are, if we don't confront them, they will be the ones dictating terms about how human beings are treated into the future. Of course, they talk about, here's what I thought was also interesting. But before I buzz into that real quick, I just wanted a quick shout out Strike Gum. We had our Labor Day sale. We had a ton of you guys pick up some Strike Gum, but that doesn't mean that you don't need more caffeine. It's the real deal, right? 90 milligrams caffeine in every piece. That's as much as a Red Bull, as much as an Amp energy drink, right in each piece, not in each pack, in each piece. There's zero sugar. And if you're somebody that works in the trades, you're a nurse, you're a cop, you're a firefighter, you can't show up to your job with a can of energy drink. What, you can do your job, sip it, and weld or answer a call, go to a domestic, a fire. No, you got to be able to get your caffeine and get back to work. That's what Strike Gum is for. You pop a piece, you chew it, get 90 milligrams of natural caffeine, made in the USA, veteran owned. Yeah, it'd be cheaper if I made it in China. Sure. But you know what? You don't want that. And I don't want it. So yeah, we spend a little more money. We make it here in the United States. It's down in Denver. Guys in Liquid Core. They're great. So pick it up. Link is in the description. Go to strikegum.com, or you can get them on Amazon. All right. Last part I wanted to mention is in the Middle East. They're saying, listen, they actually acknowledged this in the press conference. They said, we are 90% of the way to a deal, a ceasefire and hostage deal in Gaza. But they're literally like, we can't get these guys the last 10%. They said it explicitly in the press conference. They're like, listen, we can't get them the last 10%. And when they come out here, they're telling, again, the wealthiest of the wealthy global cohort. They're saying, listen, we need the wealthy in the Middle Eastern world, in the Muslim world, and we need the wealthy that are connected to the Israeli world. And we need you guys to put the screws to these people, because they're both going to keep killing civilians until this ends. This is going to be this is a terrible conflict, and we're close to a ceasefire. We're close to an end. We just need you to push them, right? Because ultimately, as I've said on this channel all the time, on both sides, this is a function of politicians who don't want to lose, and they are willing to kill civilians in order to ensure that they don't look bad or lose power. Both of them. Don't at me in the comments. I do not care what your opinion is. I've been to war. I protected civilians. And neither of these sides have protecting civilians as their first commitment. Anyway, that's all I had. This has been a really interesting video. Let me know in the comments if you think there's other messages that they put out that we missed. And I will see you guys in the next one. Huge thank you to our Colonel tier members, including Martin Baum, Chris Rossi, Stuart Abel, Daniel Brown, Sergei Zinchenko, Chris Holmes, Chris Gorsuch, Daniel M., and Ida Skycall. Thank you guys for being members, and a huge thank you to our Lieutenant tier members. Could not do this without you guys. I appreciate you so much, and I will see you all in the next one. Cheers.